Alors bonjour, bienvenue à cette conférence de presse. Welcome to this press conference. My name is Guillaume Saint-Pierre and I'll be your moderator. So with us today we have Emmanuel Dubourg from the Liberal Party, Randeep, Sarai from the Liberal Party as well, Luc Desilets, Bloc Québécois, and Rachel Blaney from the NDP. So we'll start with comments and then we'll go to questions. Go ahead, Monsieur Dubourg, allez-y.
Thank you very much. Mesdames, Messieurs, membres de la Galerie de la Presse, chers collègues, bon après-midi. Comme on a dit, je suis accompagné du deuxième vice-président, M. Luc Desilets, de M. Randeep Sarai, and from Ms. Blaney, Rachel Blaney. Today, I'm going to present to you a unanimous report. C'est un immense plaisir pour moi de vous accueillir pour le dépôt de ce rapport important sur les vétéranes canadiennes. D'entrée de jeu, je veux saluer le courage des vétéranes qui ont témoigné. Je remercie également les membres du comité pour leur collaboration exemplaire et pour avoir agi sans faire preuve de partisanerie. Je suis très heureux d'avoir dirigé les travaux de cette étude importante dont les enjeux sont à la fois sensibles et déchirants. This study of female veterans is the largest to have been undertaken by the Veterans Affairs Committee since its creation in 2006. Nearly 100 people gave their testimony at 23 meetings, not counting the briefs and numerous other communications received. L'organisation et le déroulement des réunions ont été adaptés aux particularités de la thématique. Les témoins et les personnes présentes dans la salle ont été avertis de la sensibilité des sujets qui pouvaient être abordés et du soutien était disponible aux besoins. La répartition du temps a été appliquée avec une plus grande souplesse afin de ne pas interrompre les vétérans qui partageaient leur expérience. Les membres du comité ont également participé à une formation sur la gestion des traumatismes. Ces démarches ont contribué à mettre en place une atmosphère plus chaleureuse. The very title of the report, Invisible No More, goes to the heart of what our veterans have told us. We believe that the Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs Canada are at a turning point in their story. It is essential that these two institutions radically transform the way they treat women who serve and those who have served. At stake in their ability to ensure the security of the population and to guarantee quality care for all veterans who find themselves ill or injured after having honorably defended Canada. Il ne suffit pas de les tolérer, de les intégrer, de leur faire une place. Les femmes qui servent sont des militaires à part entière. Quand elles ne sont plus militaires, elles sont des vétéranes à part entière. Elles doivent être vues, entendues et reconnues à ce titre par les Forces armées canadiennes, par Anciens combattants Canada et par l'ensemble des autres institutions du gouvernement du Canada. Ce n'est qu'ainsi la population canadienne pourra à son tour voir, entendre et reconnaître sa dette envers la contribution inestimable des femmes à la sécurité du pays. The issue that most undermines the possibility of presenting a military career as an attractive option for women is, of course, that of military social trauma. To date, attempts to reform military culture in order to eradicate this scourge have all come from outside, under pressure from court decisions. The Canadian Armed Forces must now take the initiative in these transformations. The rhetoric is promising, but sustainable change remains to be seen. Au cours des 3 dernières années, 3400 demandes d'indemnisation ont été déposées à anciens combattants pour des traumatismes sexuels. Une unité spéciale a dû être créée pour en assurer le traitement. Les politiques qui orientent les décisions continuent d'imposer un fardeau de preuves important aux demandeuses. La crédibilité du ministère dépendra donc de sa capacité à traiter ces demandes de manière équitable et en temps opportun. To help achieve this, the report makes 42 recommendations that the Government of Canada should commit to implementing immediately. Some of the most important recommendations are presented in the press release that have been circulated. Avant de conclure, j'aimerais ajouter quelques mots sur les vétéranes de la Gendarmerie royale du Canada. Elles ont un statut distinct dans les politiques d'anciens combattants Canada, puisqu'elles relèvent d'un régime législatif différent. Il en a été peu question au cours de l'étude et elles auront sans doute le sentiment qu'une fois de plus, leurs préoccupations ont été laissées pour compte. Dans la section sur les traumatismes sexuels, nous espérons avoir pu compenser cette lacune en présentant aussi clairement que possible la contribution déterminante des vétérans de la GRC aux aspects juridiques de la lutte contre les inconduites sexuelles. On my behalf and on the behalf of the members of the committee, I would like to pay tribute to the remarkable courage it took for this woman to come forward and testify. It is with deep respect that we also welcome the legitimate choice of those who prefer to remain silent. Nous espérons que les suites qui seront données aux recommandations de ce rapport permettront aux vétérans d'acquérir la visibilité qui leur a manqué et contribueront à offrir des perspectives stimulantes aux femmes qui se sentent appelées par la carrière militaire. En terminant, j'aimerais aussi vous mettre en garde en lisant ce rapport, car il y a des parties déchirantes lorsque vous allez en prendre connaissance de ce rapport. Je vous remercie et je passe donc la parole au deuxième vice-président du comité, M. Luc Desilets.
Merci, M. le Président. Merci beaucoup. Moi aussi, je vais commencer en soulignant que je suis fier, honoré d'avoir participé à cette étude historique, oui, historique, et d'envergure, que j'ai eu le bonheur d'initier avec ma collègue Rachel Blaney. Peut-être dire un merci dans le fin fond à notre Jean-Rodrigue National Paris, qui a su orchestrer un paquet de demandes que j'avais en lien avec les femmes et que Rachel avait aussi, pour en faire une étude magistrale, ainsi que le greffier, évidemment, qui a eu à négocier avec ces multiples sujets-là. Une étude sur l'expérience vécue par les femmes vétérans, puis qui, après quelques rencontres seulement, a pris une autre tournure en devenant une étude sur l'expérience vécue par les vétéranes. Ce changement peut peut-être paraître anodin, dit comme ça ou dit rapidement comme ça, mais c'est en réalité très, très, très significatif. En adoptant le mot « vétérane », le ministère des Anciens combattants et le comité, évidemment, permanent des Anciens combattants en est venu qu'à reconnaître la présence et l'importance des femmes dans l'armée. Des femmes dans l'armée. Ce titre est donc, pour moi en tout cas, très porteur d'un sens très profond. Il rend à quelque part un peu plus visible les femmes vétérans devenus vétéranes, en leur offrant une reconnaissance. Un mot qui est une reconnaissance qu'elles méritent amplement, énormément. Ça, c'est aussi un exemple très concret pour vous démontrer d'où nous partions et en quoi cette étude est devenue un peu ou est historique. Nous avons abordé le vécu des femmes sous toutes ses coutures, je le crois. L'accessibilité, l'égalité à l'emploi, on cherchait à valider le côté équité. Et comme M. le Président le dit, nous avons entendu des témoignages qui nous ont hantés, dans les jours suivants, et certains qui continuent à être très présents à mon esprit. Ce n'était pas nécessairement Jojo. On fait cette conférence de presse-là aujourd'hui, et nous sommes aujourd'hui le 12 juin. Juste vous dire que le 12 juin, dans plusieurs États des États-Unis, cette journée, elle est dédiée à la reconnaissance des vétéranes. C'est un hasard, on n'a pas choisi le 12, c'était une contrainte d'horaire pour tout le monde. Mais le 12, aujourd'hui, aux États-Unis, cette journée-là sert d'une façon particulière à reconnaître les vétéranes. Et puis, je vous dire qu'on est un petit peu loin de ça au Québec et au Canada. L'objectif de cette journée-là aux États-Unis, c'est effectivement de mettre en lumière les disparités en matière de soins, de reconnaissance, d'avantages que les vétérans reçoivent et de souligner la présence toujours croissante de ces femmes dans les forces armées et de leur rendre évidemment un hommage particulier. C'est le genre d'hommage qu'on devrait rendre à tous les jours, mais lorsqu'on dédie une journée, c'est des hommages qui sont peut-être un peu plus concentrés et qui sont à tout le moins dits publiquement. Pour moi, ce type de journée-là devrait exister au Québec et au Canada. Peut-être, je suis un grand rêveur, moi, peut-être qu'on n'en viendra qu'à ça après la lecture par tous nos collègues de la Chambre. Peut-être qu'on en viendra à ça, je le souhaiterais énormément. Le rapport qu'on dépose aujourd'hui va, je pense, dans ce sens-là, dans ce besoin de reconnaître qui elles sont, ce qu'elles ont fait et en quoi elles sont utiles aux forces armées, évidemment, et en quoi elles ont su protéger notre démocratie. C'est un des rapports les plus volumineux. C'est l'étude la plus volumineuse que le comité a fait à ce jour. C'est le résultat d'une vingtaine de rencontres, 23 rencontres exactement, avec témoins, mais une série d'autres rencontres se sont ajoutées pour le dépôt du rapport, l'analyse du rapport, le dépôt des recommandations, la validation, la revalidation des recommandations, etc. Donc, on parle de presque une année de travail. On le dit un peu tantôt, mais vous allez y lire des témoignages vraiment poignants. Personnellement, ça fait 5 ans que je suis sur le comité, mais depuis les tout débuts, ça a été mon premier et le seul comité sur lequel j'ai siégé. Et j'ai entendu des choses particulières qui portent à réflexion, qui nous amènent à faire un examen de conscience en tant que citoyen et peut-être encore plus en tant que député. Parce qu'en tant que député, on a un tout petit peu de pouvoir. Puis en tant que député siégeant sur le comité, on a peut-être un tout petit peu plus de pouvoir pour permettre de faire bouger tout ça. Un grand merci à mes collègues, puis il y en a plusieurs dans la salle. Je pense que pratiquement tout le monde du comité est dans la salle. Un grand merci à tout le monde qui ont vraiment cru, je pense, dans la nécessité de faire cette réflexion-là. C'est le travail de notre comité, mais c'est avant tout la participation et la collaboration de près d'une centaine de personnes qui sont venues alimenter notre réflexion. Une centaine de personnes. C'est pas n'importe quoi, et c'est une centaine de personnes de différents milieux, pas tous des vétéranes, mais des gens qui côtoient des vétéranes, des gens qui ont travaillé avec des vétéranes, des gens qui accueillent des vétéranes dans différents organismes. Alors, ça nous a donné un portrait, en tout cas que je crois, que nous croyons, assez ample et assez exhaustif de la situation des vétéranes au Québec et au Canada. Je souhaite évidemment que les recommandations, les 42 recommandations que nous avons dans le rapport puissent redonner un peu de pouvoir, beaucoup de pouvoir à ces vétéranes. Et je reste convaincu que, compte tenu de l'implication des femmes pour la défense du Canada, que le gouvernement se doit de leur rendre hommage. Et à l'intérieur du rapport, il y a une recommandation que j'ai déposée pour laquelle j'espère énormément la mise en application, c'est qu'il puisse y avoir une œuvre d'art. Parlons pas de monument, une œuvre d'art qui leur soit dédiée, qui puisse rendre compte de tout leur engagement, tout le sacrifice qu'elles ont fait. Peut-on juste rappeler qu'elles représentent autour de 17 % des militaires? On parle de 75 000 vétéranes au Canada, autour de 17 000 au Québec, et il n'y a qu'une œuvre d'art dédiée aux femmes ou aux vétéranes dans tout le Canada, qui a été faite par le ministère des Anciens combattants, en collaboration toujours avec le ministère, notre ministère voisin qui est le Patrimoine Canada. Alors que si on compare à ce qui existe en termes d'œuvres d'art pour les vétérans au Canada, c'est le jour et la nuit. Une œuvre d'art par rapport à des centaines d'œuvres d'art qui ont été créées. Alors, ce serait, je pense, la moindre des choses, qu'il puisse y avoir quelque chose qui aille dans ce sens-là. Alors, on a souhaité, à quelque part, à travers ce rapport-là, de faire en sorte que les vétéranes ne soient plus invisibles. C'est un mot qui nous a été lancé par une de nos témoins et qui nous est resté à l'esprit et qu'on a encore à l'esprit. Les vétéranes sont à quelque part ou étaient à quelque part invisibles. Si on a pu le moindrement permettre à ces femmes-là d'apparaître sous un autre jour, bien, tant mieux, on pourra s'en féliciter dans quelques temps. Alors, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Luc Desilets, deuxième vice-président du comité et du Bloc québécois. Maintenant, we're going to switch to Mr. Randeep Sarai, Parliamentarian Secretary. Oh, sorry, we're going to go to Ms. Rachel Blaney from the NDP. Ms. Blaney.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. You know, when I put forward a motion initially on women veterans, and of course my friend Mr. Desilets added to it, I was surprised when I asked the analyst to give us information about past studies done on veteran women when he told us none had ever been done in the history of this committee. So when the women came forward and started testifying repeatedly that they felt invisible, it made a lot of sense to me. What I want to acknowledge at the very beginning, though, is the solidarity of the women. Women veterans showed up repeatedly to sit with other women veterans that were testifying. I've never seen that in a committee where women kept showing up for women to make sure that they were supported as they were talking about very painful and intimate issues about their life. But what I think is fundamental is that this report lets us know that the culture of CAF and VAC has to change. We know for sure that VAC services are based on documentation that veterans had when they served. But when women joined the CAF, there was not anything put in place to actually be able to fulsomely document a woman's experience while serving. This means that women's bodies were destroyed by equipment that didn't fit them properly. This means that women were left vulnerable when there was sexual misconduct. It means that women were repeatedly left invisible and silenced because of the lack of curiosity or interest or taking that step to make sure that they were included. And when we hear the stories, and I recommend people read this report, it is quite terrifying how many of them did experience sexual misconduct. We hope that we have a safer world, but we definitely know that when people enter something and no work is done to properly include them, we leave them vulnerable. So Canada and all Canadians have to take accountability for that and make sure that it doesn't happen anymore. And I think this study also challenges all of us as Canadians to realize how often we don't see women as veterans. Many veteran women testified that when they wear their medals on Remembrance Day, they're often asked if it's their father's medals, their husband's medals, or even their son's medals, not ever being acknowledged that those are the medals that they fought for. So I think it does tell us something, that we are not taking that opportunity to see these women, and that their feeling of being invisible is something that we are all complicit in. And so we must do better. And we also had an opportunity to hear from RCMP veterans. And I think it's important for us to recognize that veterans are the ones that served and also the RCMP veterans. So that is really important that we remember that. It did result in me understanding that we need more trauma-informed services, especially at VAC, where we're still trying to figure out what women were not aware of, were not provided service with. One of the things we heard repeatedly is the lack of research on women's health and what happens to them when they're serving. Very important to think about simple things like what happens when you're flying and you're pregnant. There were sad stories told about women losing pregnancies and not being sure if it was because of their service. We need to give women the information they need to do their jobs safely. And so this is something that I was really impressed upon, and I think we need to take active work there. The other thing that we heard, and I wish I could remember it all, is about how many veterans are single women and how often they're assessed for support services and told that their husbands or their children can take care of things without identifying that those women are actually single and they need the supports in place put for them. So I think what we heard really clearly is we need more research. We need to start treating women veterans like they matter, like we want them to serve our country, and that we're going to do the work to make it possible for them to do it safely. I also left with the strong determination of these women who are proud of their service, who want to encourage their daughters and granddaughters to also serve, and that they want to make that way safer for them. And so I think it's important that we recognize these are not women that came in the room as victims. These are women who came in the room asking for accountability and asking for things to get better, so that when they encourage young women to join, they know that they're helping them join somewhere that is going to be safe. And I recognize work is being done, but it's very obvious more needs to be done. So my hope is that their sacrifice will be honored in the actions of the government, and I will continue to fight every which way that I can to make sure that these 42 recommendations are put into action, because these women deserved it. They showed up, they told hard stories, they were radically honest, they kept showing up, they supported one another. So their dedication has to become our dedication. And I hope that people understand it's all Canadians that need to be dedicated, not just the parliamentarians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blaney. And now let's close with Mr. Randeep Sarai from the Liberal. He's a parliamentarian secretary of the minister.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'm here with my colleagues also from the Liberal caucus who have been working very hard on this. Wilson Miao, Sean Casey, Brian May, and I think Lisa Hepner is at the reception. Like many Canadians, I have a personal connection to veterans. My father was a veteran, and I didn't like to, and didn't like to talk about his time in the military. So I have an idea of how difficult it was for these women veterans to come to the committee and share with us their stories, their struggles, but also as a government, how we can do better. I want to assure all women veterans that we heard them. The report, as you've heard, is divided into 6 parts. The portrait of Canadian women veterans, a kind of picture of how it is, research needs, invisibility of women veterans issues, the impact of military service on their work, VAC policies, and military sexual trauma. The report is primarily based on witness testimony. As such, the recommendations reflect these central themes. Women veterans have courageously served our country. It is important to listen to their stories for our government to ensure that we are addressing their needs. We must continue to recognize that women have different experiences than men, both during and after their service within the Canadian Armed Forces. Veteran Affairs Canada already started the work and implemented a gender-based analysis for all of their programs and policies. Since 2019, VAC has a dedicated team focused on the priorities of women veterans. In 2019, VAC hosted the first Women Veterans Forum, which was held in Montreal in March. At this year's forum, veterans and stakeholders discuss issues impacting veterans, including women-focused research, service after service, women's health, homelessness, and recognition. At the forum, Minister Petitpas-Taylor announced the creation of a new Women Veterans Council where current and former members of the Canadian Armed Forces and Royal Canadian Mounted Police will directly report to the Minister and collaborate with Veterans Affairs Canada to address the inequities and barriers experienced by women veterans. Applications to the Council were launched this week, and all serving members, as well as CAF and RCMP veterans, are encouraged to apply to share their perspectives. As a government, we must do better, and we will do better. This report shows us the gaps we need to fill to improve the experience of women veterans, and we look forward to doing so. Thank you, merci.
Thank you very much. So let's go back to you.
I just want to remind everyone using an earpiece just to keep it as far away as possible from the mic. So we'll now go to questions. People that are connected virtually can use the raise hand function if they want to signal that they want to ask your questions. We'll start with Chris Rand, CBC.
Hi everyone. For the TV and radio deadlines, which are now, I need the main recommendations from this report delivered to the microphone, to the camera, please. What are of the 42, what are the main recommendations? And I need it in clear English sound bites that I'm going to cut down to 10 seconds for tonight's TV. My apologies.
Thank you, but my colleagues can jump in, but let me tell you that all 40 recommendations are important. All of them. All of them for all, no, I think that we can prioritize those 42 recommendations because we have veterans women who who fought for things. So personally, I think it's impossible, but
This is not my supplemental, but I have it in a press release. I need it read out so I have clips, please. I don't have clips.
So I would say that VAC has to acknowledge that there is not documentation. That's one of the top ones. So many veteran women are trying to get their claims and they don't have documentation because CAF couldn't do it. So one of the main things is they need to start just recognizing those services right away. That women veterans need to be provided safety. So if they have an MST claim, that they don't have to necessarily do it internally, but can go externally so that they can get validation and supports. That there needs to be more peer support for women. Is there anything else anyone would like to add?
I would like to add, I think it's important, the recommendation that medical issues that are pertinent to women particularly be identified more closely and how it affects women in their health particularly. I think it's a very important recommendation.
And focused research on women. We don't have it, and there needs to be more focused research on women.
And my supplemental finally is, do you think that the Canadian Armed Forces, and could we use the full name, not CAF, for people to understand, do you think the Canadian Armed Forces has made changes so what the women who have come and have poured their hearts out, and we've seen the transcript, you saw it in person, poured their hearts out, do you think that things have changed so this won't be repeated?
I do not think that the Canadian Armed Forces are prepared to do this. I believe there's some actions being taken, but I think too many are still vulnerable.
Voulez-vous une réponse en français?
Je suis travaille pour le service anglais, ça c'est mon problème. Excuse-moi.
I can just add, I think a lot of policy changes in the Canadian Armed Forces have been made. I think the culture will take a while to change, and I think there's there's a lot of work to be done to change that culture so the attitude completely changes, so those policies come into effect and they can actually be fruitful and helpful for the women.
and they should be implemented by women survivors.
Okay. We will now go to Sarah Plowman, CTV News.
Thank you very much. One of the parts of the report talks about how when women who've been sexually traumatized have to tell their stories, it's re-traumatizing. Can you give us a bit more detail about what you mean by that? What does someone have to do that is re-traumatizing, and what you recommend changes?
Yes, we can jump, but let me say a word that when we said re-traumatizing, because at Veterans Affairs, at VAC, Veterans Affairs Canada, they have business cases, and even though this veteran go to one business cases or not, if it's the same business case, they used to say, tell us what your story again. And they already have everything in the file, but they're still asking one more. And you know that those stories are really troubling, and it traumatizes those veterans again and again.
Yeah, so caseworkers will work with women veterans, and if they get a change, they're always asking to be told the story again. So what we're recommending is that those reports actually be looked at, that before the conversation happens between the service provider and the veteran, that they review it so that the woman doesn't have to tell the story again. Because every time they have to tell it, it's re-traumatizing, and it also means that they're less likely to ask for services because they know they have to do it again and again.
Follow up?
Yeah, you spoke about the culture needing to change. Can you, in your own words, define what you think the culture currently is in the Canadian Armed Forces that would allow what has happened to happen?
Well, I think when it happened, of course, women were just told that they could go, and there was no work done to prepare for what that would look like, and there was no questions asked. So we know that when a group that is the majority has another group join it, and they have done no work to actually examine how to include them in a meaningful way, it means all of the images of the job are reflected on the majority. So basically, when women joined the forces repeatedly, they were treated just like men and told that they should be treated just like men. It's not that they can't do the job. I think if anybody listened to that testimony, you know these women are fierce and strong. It's that they didn't have the tools to do the job well. And it also means that they were often sidelined, which allows for vulnerability. And often that's where we saw violence, we saw sexual misconduct. And I think it's important to even understand that women did not have uniforms that were there for them when they were pregnant. So they were modifying their own uniforms. So it's the basic things. So when you think of that, again and again, women were being told, you don't belong. And so this is a culture that is very filled with, I'm going to be frank, toxic masculinity. And I think if we want to have a more inclusive force, we need to deal with that. But it can only be led by people who've experienced that. We can't ask people who are in the majority to guide the way. It has to be the strong women who've been there. And so I can think of specific examples of women-owned businesses that are teaching about sexual misconduct, about how to deal with people who've been traumatized, and they aren't the ones actually training the people who are serving. That's shameful. We need to make sure that that training is in place. And of course, on the Veterans Affairs side, we definitely need trauma-informed service providers so that then when they're working with women who are coming forward, maybe 10, 15 years after serving, to tell their story, that they're prepared to receive that story in the best way possible. And that there's a connection between the Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs, so that if the story comes to the Veterans Affairs Canada, it's fed back into the Canadian Armed Forces, so that there's a cycle there of accountability, and that is not in place right now.
Do you guys have any more questions? I think we can if we have more time, I guess we
Just ask, the Conservatives also put up a supplemental report. Mr. Ptolemy rose in the House of Commons, also mentioning he's a veteran. He's not here now. Any reason why we don't see them here?
What I can say, during the committee, and we work together, and the report that we are tabling today, it's a unanimous report. But we can have some different opinions, so they have the right to do so. And but
They were invited to be here,
they were invited,
and
exactly.
they are not.
You good? Okay. Sarah, any other questions? You're okay?
Sure. I mean, you're calling for an apology. Why is that necessary, and when do you want to see that apology come?
Personally want to see it as soon as possible. And the reason that we recommended that there be an apology is exactly because the women said that they were invisible and that what happened to them was invisible. So they wanted an acknowledgement, and hopefully by acknowledging the history and acknowledging the lack of information, it will help services be provided on the Veterans Affairs side of that spectrum. So hopefully Canadian Armed Forces, the Minister of Defense, will see right to stand up and talk about the history of women serving and where they were left out, so that we can see better services on the other side at Veterans Affairs Canada.
And also some veteran women said that there was an apology and by the government, but women's was not specifically specified in that. They said that the LGBTQ plus group was named, but not women, and they feel hurt by that.
Follow up or? This it was the press conference. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Merci. Appreciate it. Great.